Hello and a very warm welcome to a special series, Business Today CEO Immersives. I'm Devina Lasson. Now on this series, we bring you in-depth and immersive conversations with India's leading business stalwarts to understand what it is that makes them tick and fetch you industry insights across sectors. On today's exciting episode, we take a look at the position of foreign banks in India and what the future might hold during a time when there's a widespread downscaling in this space. Without further ado, Sourav Majumdar, Editor Business Today, and Anand Adhikari, Managing Editor Business Today, are in conversation with Surojit Shome, CEO India of DBS Bank, to discover what the future of foreign banks in India may be. Take a look.
Thank you for speaking to us at Business Today. I'll jump straight into the first question. Foreign banks in India are, in a sense, scaling down in some parts, in some pockets. Market share has gone down from about 6% to 4% from the time before the global financial crisis hit us and now. And yet, in your case, you are growing and you have some interesting plans lined up. How do you explain this dichotomy?
As you know, post the global financial crisis, many of the global banks had capital requirements at their main balance sheet. So as they looked at their spread, they looked at what are the areas where they could get efficiency. For us, on the other side, Asia is our main market. We are an Asian bank, and more than 10 years back, we decided that within the Asian environment, we would concentrate on 6 major markets, India being one of them. For us, the strategic priorities are a bit different than other international banks. So that's one point of contrast. Second is, because we are concentrated in 6 major markets, we can afford to remain very focused. Post the financial crisis, Reserve Bank changed its policies and said for international banks to grow in India, they needed to subsidiarize. So we were the first banks to actually express interest to subsidiarize, and then over the next 3-4 years, we finally got our subsidiary done. And in 2019, we became a subsidiary. So that's really the big contrast or dichotomy, if you will.
And sir, you talked about the global strategies to conserve capital. Now, if we look at the last 2 decades, we have seen the private sector banks also matching up, to the product quality, service levels, and even the technology levels of foreign banks. How do you see that? I mean, has it also in a way contributed to the winning interest of foreign banks in India?
Every market is very competitive, which means that if you want to play in a market and win, you need to continue to invest. And that changes the paradigm, because if you have to remain competitive in a market, you cannot just milk the market, if you will. You can make some investment and hope that you will carry on. You will have to continue to invest, because the domestic banks will continue to invest in technology, so you have to match. So to that point, costs of technology, of course, is high. So you need to be focused. So that's really the one issue which has to be brought in.
To your point about subsidiaries and the fact that you've been able to manage subsidiaries, tell us a little bit more about your experience in India. How is that working out in terms of the subsidiary, management of subsidiary?
Yeah, so management of subsidiary has a couple of complexities, correct? One is you have to have more local governance. Again, right. We are used to having local boards. I think it's more a philosophy issue. Once you're comfortable with the philosophy that you have a external board, you have independent members, you can manage that, then it is much easier. So if organizations are not used to managing subsidiaries with local governance, where you have to balance the governance between the parent bank and the local subsidiary, then that can become a bit more challenging issue.
So the RBI has also allowed you to acquire a bank as a foreign bank. Now, has it in a way resulted in any positive sentiments amongst the foreign bankers?
So RBI to some extent has clearly demonstrated that it has the ability to do something which was there in policy, now in practice, correct? We are the first bank who was allowed to rescue a distressed bank. I would think that in the longer run, that's a very strong statement. Both statement from RBI, Government of India, from an international bank being able to do this. So people would be watching, as they say, this event, and over the next 3, 4, 5 years, as they see a bank like DBS being able to scale up through an inorganic move like this, I'm sure other banks would look at that.
What do you think is preventing some of these people from actually setting up subsidiaries where your experience has been very favorable and you've in fact acquired a bank?
If a bank is trying to conserve capital, then subsidiarizing by definition it makes it a little bit more difficult. There are at least 2 or 3 other large international banks. If they were to subsidiarize, they have major capital impact on their parent balance sheet. So I think that's a financial issue. Second is, if you don't manage subsidiaries, then it's also a governance issue. You have to be comfortable managing a 2-step governance process. And then finally, if banks are rationalizing their global network, then at that point to change course is not that easy. So I think medium term you are seeing the reaction of capital conservation, but I think in the longer run our experiment will attract attention.
So RBI also caps the foreign banks asset at 15% of the total.
But we are far below that. So I don't think it's there in the policy. But I don't think foreign banks have actually moved in the other direction. So I would think that for now, that's not there is enough headroom.
But let me, sort of ask you a further question on the point about other foreign banks from non-Western regions planning to come into India. You think that's going to be, sort of a trend the next 3 to 5 years, given the DBS experience?
It could be. I would not be surprised. As I said, it would be premature to say which jurisdictions they will come from. But I think India remains a very attractive market. Definitely for us, it's a very attractive market.
And we have also seen, Australia and New Zealand Bank returning to India, after exiting in 2000 decade. Do you see maybe in future, some sort of activity there?
It is a competitive market, as you rightly said. Domestic banks are very good. They have technology. You have a lot of fintech, which means that partnerships with fintech would also be opportunity for both, government-owned banks, which are obviously modernizing, but also domestic banks. So it's a competitive marketplace where you have to be willing to stay the course. It's not a get in, get out kind of market.
Where do you see your role, coming in the overall banking sector?
I think customer has choice. And as a brand, DBS is an aspirational brand. So if we can make sure that we create an aspirational positioning for DBS, a customer choice will determine market share. And the market is large enough for all players to carve out a niche, a profitable niche for themselves. That's how I see it. It's a large enough market. It's also very fragmented. Yes. So given that it's a fragmented market, products, propositions, service, all of that will count and the customer will make the choice.
And you see fintechs actually partnering rather than competing with banks?
For our sake, absolutely. We see fintechs as being great partners. We are partnering with several of them in different fields. There's always competition, but I think partnership outweighs the competitive. There will be competition at the edges. You cannot. We also partnering, by the way, with non-bank finance companies, where we are partnering through co-lending. And I think that construct that RBI has rolled out and further liberalized provides a great opportunity again for banks like us to partner with originators, servicers who have deep niche strengths.
You talked about the NBFC tie-up. I mean, the NBFC route is also available to foreign banks. So why foreign banks are not exploring that platform?
At the end of the day, I think if you are a foreign bank which ideally funds its growth through deposits, you want to be able to have a deposit franchise, correct? An NBFC essentially a wholesale funded business.
On the acquisition, how is the integration working out, and are you also looking at smaller opportunities to grow further? Because clearly acquisition is one of your preferred growth routes.
So any acquisition takes 2 to 3 years for it to first you have 3 levels of integration. Firstly, what meets the eye, which is the technology, the branding, the branches. That takes some amount of time. The more important one is people, culture, products, propositions. So it takes between 2 to 3 years to get all of that aligned. While we always look at inorganic, we think that the platform that we have built with the integration and the merger gives us enough of a scale to be able to build our organic pace, and that In the short run, we'll continue to do that. For us now, we don't have that many gaps in India for us to require acquisition. However, if they're attractive bolt-on, we'll always look at it.
There is a lot of talk about the global, challenges. Inflation is one of them. The whole, geopolitical tensions which are constantly playing out. We are looking at a long-drawn conflict in Russia and Ukraine. What are your, thoughts on how it will affect the Indian financial system?
I think in the short run, nobody can escape this. This is, as they say, when you have a tsunami, it will hit everybody. So, question is, how do you weather that? I think the Indian economy is strong enough to be able to weather that. It will leave some damages. It will leave, some industries will suffer, consumers will suffer some erosion of purchasing power. In the shorter run, you might get dips in, GDP growth. But I think India is resilient enough to be able to come out of that. If the war, however, extends, then it would obviously be a little more challenging.
And you've put together an acquisition, you're now integrating that, your competitive landscape is getting intense. In all this, how does Mr. Shome relax? How do you sort of unwind after a hard day? What are the things you do over the weekend? Is there a weekend, for instance?
No, there is definitely a weekend. Yeah, so I'm quite fond of sport, so I play some golf. I wish I could play more, but yeah, that's definitely a passion. But I'm also, I try and spend time with my family, travel. Travel has been difficult, but so golf first passion, travel, that's always enough golf to be done, enough travel to be done. So I think
to charge you up for
you don't run out of options there. Yes,
thank you very much, Mr. Shome. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.